The Bob Iger era of Disney is at an end. On December 31st of 2021, he will step down as chairman of Disney's board, the position he has held since Bob Chapek succeeded him as CEO, and leave Disney for good. As such, Iger will no longer be overlooking Chapek's every move, but that doesn't mean Chapek is free to run Disney exactly as he sees fit. Iger could in a sense do that during the latter years of his reign, since he then served as both CEO and chairman. But that was a fluke. Good business practice, as well as Disney tradition, dictates the role of CEO and chairman should be held by two different people. And so, Bob Chapek will answer to a new boss, namely Susan Arnold. That leaves the question, what kind of boss will she be to Chapek? Will the two clash, like Iger and Chapek did, or could the two be aligned around a common cause? Only time will tell for certain, but based on the information at hand, we can nonetheless provide some informed speculation. To assist in that, we reached out to someone who knows and understands corporate politics in general, as well as the particularities of Disney's politics, namely writer and producer Kamran Pasha. In this video, we will begin by briefly going through who Disney's new chairman is and how she rose to power within the company, before providing some analysis on what kind of relationship she might have with Bob Chapek, and how the two of them might influence not just Disney, but Hollywood at large going forward. On December 1st, it was revealed to the world that the new chairman at Disney would be Susan Arnold. Her resume includes stints as an executive at investment firm the Carlyle Group, as well as Procter & Gamble, and in addition to a board member at Disney. She has also been a board member at both McDonald's and NBTY. To put it shortly, she is an extremely accomplished and powerful businesswoman. Unlike her predecessor Bob Iger, she does not come from the Hollywood elite. Case in point, most of Hollywood would never have heard about Susan Arnold until she was announced as the next Disney chairman. Instead, she comes from the elite of commercial enterprise, and for the past 2 decades, she has consistently been ranked among the top 10 most powerful businesswomen on the planet. Interestingly, Disney CEO Bob Chapek also came from the world of commercial enterprise. No one in Hollywood had heard about him either, until he was suddenly announced as Disney's new CEO. As such, the two absolute top spots at Disney are now occupied by relative outsiders to Hollywood. That might not be a coincidence. Former journalist, Disney veteran, and our good friend Kamran Pasha has a very intriguing reading of the situation.
I think the news that Susan Arnold has been appointed or will be appointed the new chairman of Disney starting January 1st is one of the most important events in Disney history and one of the most important events in recent Hollywood history. And I'm going to liken it to something, because I'm a Star Wars fan, I'm going to liken it to something that I think will surprise people in the chat and people that are watching this video. This is the revelation of Darth Sidious. Chapek was never the boss this whole time. Even as he took power the last year, he was the apprentice. He was Darth Maul, he was Darth Vader, and he was out there in public doing what the apprentice does. And now the revelation of who's been behind the scenes this whole time and who put him in power has come about. Because let's look at who Ms. Arnold is. The most important thing in her bio, in her resume, is that she was a member, or is a member, of the Carlyle Group. The Carlyle Group is one of the most powerful and wealthiest private equity investment groups on the planet. And she's been there, I believe, since 2007 when she left Procter & Gamble, or maybe 2012. I don't know the exact dates, but she's been there for at least a decade. And I have said on Midnight's Edge for over a year that Bob Chapek is the investor's choice, and that he was able to take over as at least nominally as CEO until he finally wrested that power earlier, this year, or at least halfway through this year, when he actually took the actual reins because Iger wouldn't let him be the CEO. So I have wondered for some time who was behind that. Who were the investors pushing for him. And now it makes absolute sense. If we look at Ms. Arnold, who's been there, who's been in the board for many years, board of Disney, and then she was appointed in 2018 as the independent lead director. So within directors, there's people that are directors essentially that are associated with the company, and there's people that are directors that are not associated with the company, the independent directors. And she was essentially put in charge of them. So now, and that was 2018, right at the height of when we were having major crises economically, the chickens coming home to roost from Lucasfilm and everything else, and Marvel beginning to make a downturn, where suddenly she is pushed forward as from being just a board member to the head of the independent investors. She was the voice of the people that were not the club. I see people asking in the chat, is she a member of the club? She may be a member of other clubs, financial clubs, Wall Street clubs, but she's not a member of the Hollywood club any more than Chapek is. And she was pushed forward because the investors were tired of losing money and watching bad PR coming out of mismanaged Disney, Lucasfilm, and the beginnings of crisis happening at Marvel. And so this was the person who pushed Bob Chapek, because Bob Chapek's rise to power as CEO made no sense from a Hollywood club perspective. He wasn't a member of the club. I had never come across his name in my years. I worked at Disney, and his name never came up in the Hollywood circles. The person that we all assumed was going to be the next CEO and chairman of Disney was going to be Iger's protege, Alan Horn, who was running the movies on his part. Now, Alan Horn is out along with Iger. And so that's because he was a failed candidate for that position. He should have been given the CEO job. And when Bob Chapek, who had been working in consumer affairs, working in with the parks, someone that the Hollywood elite crowd had never dealt with, took that position, something was up. He had been pushed there, and he had obviously been pushed by someone powerful enough to knock out candidates like Alan Horn. And I've been wondering who that person was for some time, and that person has now revealed themselves, because Bob Chapek, over the course of this year, has been doing what the Sith apprentice does, which is clear out the way for the master to reveal themselves. That's what Darth Maul did. That's what Vader did. And they're out there clearing the brush so the master can unveil themselves. And so we are now seeing the mastermind behind Chapek and the master behind the new strategy, which is Susan Arnold, representative of the investor class, not part of the club, head of the independent board members who are not part of the Disney internal structure. I've heard people say, well, this is obviously a vote of no confidence in Bob Chapek because he should have been given the chairman role. He was never going to give the chairman role. That's not the normal way they do things at Disney. When they abnormally gave the CEO the chairman role as well was Iger in 2012. And he did that because he was coming off of, I've bought Star Wars, I've changed history, I've taken over Lucas's greatest thing. And so he was able to leverage that to give himself the CEO role. The chairman role along with CEO. And we saw the disaster that followed because we had no one restraining him. When does the disaster for Disney begin? It's in 2012 with the purchase of Lucasfilm. That's when Disney goes off the rails, and when you've got Bob Iger running around like a drunken sailor, throwing money everywhere and hanging out at parties and getting photo ops and not running the company properly and letting these people like Miss Kennedy and then eventually Mr. Feige go off the rails and do whatever they wanted to do because he's too busy hanging out with them at parties, right? And looking good for the cameras. So you needed someone to restrain him, and that person was not there anymore. And so that's the normal structure of Disney, as they point out in this article, is to have those roles be separate and to have the chairman serve as an overseer of the CEO and held him accountable. Nobody was holding Bob Iger accountable for a decade, and we saw the disaster that happened under that thing. So they're not going to go back to that structure, and it's not a good corporate structure anyway. It invests too much power and too much ego in one person. But what we're having here is the person that put Bob Chapek in to clean house finally comes and says, well, I'm taking over now. And so this is not this is not a vote of no confidence in Bob Chapek. This is Bob Chapek unveiling to everybody, guess who's been behind me the whole time? Guess whose arm I am? And so whatever Bob Chapek's strategy is, and we're going to talk about his strategy, and I have my opinions about that, that's not coming from him alone. That's coming from the person that gave him their CEO job and has now unveiled themselves by declaring themselves the chairman. We're seeing the rise of the empress, and there's so many layers to this that we can talk about for so long, but one of the most important layers is that she is a woman and she's also LGBTQ. She's a lesbian. And so no one is claiming and no one believes for 1 second that she got this job because of those factors. She's an incredibly competent person. She ran Procter & Gamble, a very consumer-oriented company. She left it before we had some of the disastrous woke stuff they did afterwards. And I'm sure she saw that and goes, "What are you guys doing? I'm not there. And now you're running these crazy ads that are anti-male for razor blades. It makes no sense. It's not something she would have done, right?" This is an incredibly accomplished human being who is ready for this role. But the fact that she is women and that she's LGBTQ, that silences all the woke mob. So if she has to move against someone who is shielding themselves with various veils of I'm of this identity or that identity, if she has to move against them, someone like a Kathleen Kennedy, or someone like that, no, there can be no blame put upon her. You don't have, well, the white man's taking out the woman, right? So that is the remarkable combination or confluence of events that we're seeing here, which means that I think we are about to enter an era of Disney unlike anything we've seen in decades. And it's an era that's going to be consumer oriented because she is consumer oriented. Her protege, Bob Chapek, is consumer oriented. So everything that everyone's been grumbling about for the past 7 years on YouTube is about to be fulfilled. And again, people, because they can't grasp what is actually happening here, this is a coup. This is essentially the end of the old republic. We're now seeing the Disney consumer empire being born, and the Empress has been revealed. This is incredible news for those of us that want Disney and Hollywood to be focused on the audience and the consumer. This is a major shift, and it's going to, I believe, begin a shift in Hollywood as well when they see who is in charge now. This is not someone from the club, and she's going to put this on a different track, and Hollywood is going to be shaking in its boots that this is how it's all played out. I think we're in for an incredible period up ahead.
The Disney Corporation will be under the joint control of CEO Bob Chapek and Chairman Susan Arnold from January 1st, 2022. If indeed Susan Arnold represents and was empowered by major institutional investors unhappy with how Iger was running Disney in the latter years, and if indeed she facilitated Chapek being appointed Iger's successor instead of Alan Horn, as Kamran's reading of the situation suggests, well, then Chapek and Arnold might be in agreement of how Disney should be run going forward. If they are in agreement, if Chapek isn't hamstrung by remnants of an old regime, well then real change can happen. The most immediate effects would be on the parks. It will take a couple of years before any major changes will be seen on screen, whether the big or small, as there is a backlog of movies and TV series greenlit by Iger that is still due out between now and 2024. But if Chapek and Arnold are in agreement about which direction Disney Entertainment should go in next, they could lead a Hollywood transformation from 2024 and onwards. Only time will tell, and whatever happens, we will be there to document it as it transpires. To make sure you don't miss out on any future analysis like this, hit subscribe if you haven't already. And while you're at it, hit that like button as well, and let us know your thoughts about all of this in the comments.